You can't expect us to treat all the grandkids the same. Some are more special, my mother announced loudly, pressing the keys to a $79,900 Range Rover into my nephew's hand. She looked straight at my children and smiled. Braden carries the Penhaligon name forward. Your kids, well, they only have their father's surname. They're not really one of us. My 12-year-old daughter froze with a $5 card in her hands. My 9-year-old son stared at his empty envelope. The entire room of 22 relatives went silent. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply walked to the birthday cake table, placed a small walnut box in front of my grandfather, and set his own gold pocket watch on top. Then I took my children's hands and led them out of the room. What my mother didn't know was that Grandpa had been waiting for this exact moment. My name is Alicia, 37 years old. Welcome back to Revenge Episodes, the place for women who stopped apologizing for protecting what's theirs. If this story already has you clenching your fists, you're exactly who we make these for. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and subscribe so the next chapter finds you. Now, let me take you back. My husband Daniel died 4 years ago this May on a stretch of Waymere 87 outside New Rochelle, in a rainstorm that the news called unseasonable. He was driving home from Albany, a semi jackknifed in the middle lane. 3 other cars stopped in time. His didn't. I was 33. Iris was 8. Wesley was 5. When the state trooper called the house, he said the words, "I'm very sorry to inform you," before I'd even gotten to the second ring. I remember thinking that was the right way to do it. No build-up. No mercy that wasn't really mercy. Just the truth, said quickly, so the rest of your life could start. Daniel's last name was Whitlock. So is my children's. So is the title company I run now. Whitlock Vaughan Title, a small firm in Stamford his father Harrison started in 1986 and left to Daniel in 2019. When Daniel died, I was already the CFO. I'd been there 9 years. The natural choice was for me to take over, and that's what I did. 6 weeks after the funeral, because 9 people worked there, and they had mortgages too. I kept my own last name when Daniel and I got married in 2013. I never explained why. I shouldn't have had to. I was a Penhaligon. My father Walter's daughter. My grandfather Edmund's granddaughter. And the name had been part of me for 24 years before I met Daniel. He thought it suited me. He used to say I looked like a Penhaligon in court and a Whitlock at home, and that was the whole point of marrying me. After he died, my mother started treating my children like they belonged somewhere else. It happened in small ways at first. A Christmas card to the Whitlock family, while my sister Madeleine's branch got cards addressed to the Penhaligons. A family group chat I noticed I'd been removed from when my Aunt Gloria forwarded me a thread by accident. Sunday dinners I didn't get invited to, and when I asked, my mother would say, "Oh, we assumed you'd be too tired to drive up." I wasn't tired. I drove up to Mystic every other weekend to see my grandfather. I just wasn't invited to the Sunday I was supposed to be too tired for. By the time Iris was 10 and Wesley was 7, I'd stopped expecting Penhaligon dinners to include us. My mother called my kids Alicia's children, the way a clerk might say, the next item on the list. Not unkindly, just separately. And every time she did it, my grandfather Edmund noticed. That's the part she never accounted for. She thought she was the head of the family. She wasn't. She was just the loudest voice in the middle of it. The real head sat quietly at the end of every table, in a charcoal cardigan that had belonged to his wife, watching us all carefully, and remembering what kind of granddaughter I'd grown into. Grandpa Edmund Augustus Penhaligon was born on April 11th, 1936, in a fishing town that doesn't exist anymore. It got swallowed into Mystic during a rezoning he could still describe in detail at age 88. He'd been a marine engineer for 41 years. His wife Henrietta died of pancreatic cancer in 1998, when I was 9, and after that, he never remarried. He kept her cardigan on the back of his chair in the parlor for 26 years, and on cold nights he wore it like a blanket and pretended he wasn't. I drove up to see him every other weekend after Daniel died. Stamford to Mystic, 85 miles up I-95, an hour and a half if the traffic gods were kind. Iris and Wesley came with me. Grandpa would meet us at the door, and the first thing he'd say to Iris was always the same. "Did you wind the watch this morning?" Because in November of 2023, Grandpa had given me a watch. That August, he'd driven himself to Yale New Haven Hospital because he kept forgetting the route home from his own grocery store. The doctor used the word mild 3 times, the way doctors use that word when they don't want you to cry yet. Mild cognitive impairment. A staging area, not a diagnosis. The early signs of what would, eventually, become worse. He didn't tell my parents. He told me. 3 months later, on a Saturday in November, he took me into his study, closed the door, and lifted a small walnut box out of the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside, on a bed of dark blue velvet, was a gold Waltham pocket watch from 1922. It had been his grandfather's. His grandfather had been the first Edmund Augustus Penhaligon, the I would later realize my mother didn't even know was there. He pressed the watch into my palm. "This has been wound by 4 Penhaligon men," he said. "I'm the last. Daniel was supposed to be the 5th, and he can't be. So I'm asking you to be the steward. Grandpa, wind it once a week, Sunday morning, and if I ever forget what I signed, wind it in front of me. It'll remind me who I was when I was still myself." He didn't say if I lose myself. He said forget what I signed. I noted that, the way a title officer notes a date. He was already worried about something. He just wasn't ready to tell me what. I wound the watch every Sunday morning for the next 29 months. I never missed once. By the summer of 2024, my parents had decided to step up. That's the phrase my mother used in a family email I wasn't on, which my Aunt Gloria, Grandpa's first cousin, who'd married into the family in 1981, forwarded me with the subject line. "Are you seeing this? Dad is declining," my mother wrote. "Walter and I are going to be there for him. We've decided to move into the Mystic house full-time. It's what family does." She wrote that in early July of 2024. Grandpa was, at that point, having maybe 1 foggy day a week. He still drove. He still cooked his own chowder. He still beat Iris at chess every other Sunday and let her win every third. But by the second week of July, my parents were in his house. They took the upstairs master bedroom, the one Henrietta had died in. They moved Grandpa downstairs to what used to be the study. Because the stairs were a hazard, they moved his desk to the garage. The walnut chair Henrietta had reupholstered in 1979 went to the basement. The seascape painting his wife had bought in Maine in 1972 stayed on the wall, but my mother didn't know what was behind it, and that turned out to matter. I asked Grandpa the next time I drove up if he wanted help moving back. He looked at me for a long time, then he said, "Let her think she won the upstairs. Let me keep the watch with you." That was the first time I understood. He wasn't surrendering. He was waiting. In September of 2024, 2 months after my parents moved in, my mother drove Grandpa to a notary in New London. Not the notary in Mystic he'd used for 40 years, not the one downtown who had handled his wife's estate. She drove him to a strip mall office tucked between a nail salon and a dry cleaner, where a woman named Vanessa Hargrove sat behind a folding table with a notary stamp she wasn't legally allowed to be using anymore. I would learn later that Vanessa Hargrove had been my sister Madeline's college roommate. Her notary commission had expired in June of 2024 after a separate violation involving a forged real estate disclosure. She'd kept the stamp because nobody had asked her to return it. Madeline had introduced her to my mother as discreet, which was a word that meant needs the money. My mother told Grandpa it was an insurance form. He told me about it later on the recording. He said, "Your mother told me, in the car, that it was about insurance, that nothing would change." I remember asking, twice, if I was signing anything that affected the house. She said no. He signed a quitclaim deed, 47 Harbor Lane, Mystic, Connecticut. Transferred to Walter A. Penhaligon and Beatrice M. Penhaligon, tenants by the entirety. Consideration, love and affection. Notary, Vanessa Hargrove. Commission expired 3 months earlier. He didn't catch the middle initial. That was the smallest, cruelest detail of the entire thing. The deed listed him as Edmund H. Penhaligon. His middle name was Augustus. Always had been. The A was carved into his grandfather's headstone in the Mystic Cemetery. It was on his marriage certificate. It was on every signature card at every bank he'd ever used. But my mother had had Vanessa Hargrove type Edmund H. on the form, and Grandpa, on a foggy day in September, in a strip mall office that smelled like acetone, had signed where she pointed. I found the deed in November. I was doing a routine title search for a probate case in New London County. The grantor index pulled up an Edmund Penhaligon transaction dated September 18th, 2024. I read it twice. I drove home that night, pulled 4 samples of Grandpa's actual signature from documents I'd kept since I was 25, and laid them out on the kitchen table. The signature on the deed was Grandpa's hand on a bad day. Light pressure, wrong slant, wrong letter. I didn't tell anyone. Not Iris, not Wesley, not David Northcott, my husband's old friend from law school, until I'd driven up to see Grandpa one more time, on a day my mother was at a charity luncheon, and asked him one question. "Grandpa, did you sign anything in September?" He thought about it. "I think so. Something about insurance. Your mother said it was nothing." He paused, and his eyes, clear that afternoon, found mine. "Why?" I didn't answer. I just held his hand. He squeezed back, slowly, and said, "Oh." That was the moment the rest of this story began. If you're still with me, and if any of this is starting to feel familiar, drop a heart in the comments. Not for the drama, for the woman in your life who held it together while everyone else got to be loud. I read every comment on Sunday mornings, while my grandfather has his coffee. Now I have to tell you about the trust. In June of 2014, 3 months after Iris was born, Grandpa drove himself to Bennett Calloway's law office in downtown Mystic and signed a revocable living trust. I know the date because the trust document is in front of me as I write this. He named himself trustee and lifetime beneficiary. He named his sister, my great-aunt Henrietta Sutton, as successor trustee. He named 4 beneficiaries upon his death: his son Walter, his granddaughter Madeline, his great-grandchildren Iris Whitlock and Wesley Whitlock held an equal share, and me, 4 equal portions. The house at 47 Harbor Lane, an investment account of $325,000 he'd built over 50 years on a marine engineer's salary, the Waltham pocket watch. A few personal items. He had Bennett Calloway draft an amendment in 2020 after Aunt Henrietta died. The amendment named me as successor trustee and as oversight authority for any property transactions involving the trust's real estate during his lifetime. He didn't tell my parents the trust existed. He didn't tell Madeline. He didn't tell me at first. Bennett Calloway sent me a sealed envelope in the mail in October of 2020, after the amendment, with a note that read, "Open only when Edmund instructs." I didn't open it for another 2 years. I opened it the week after Daniel died because Grandpa called me on the phone and said, in a voice I'd never heard him use before, "Alicia, I need you to read what's in the envelope now." So I read it. I sat at my kitchen table in Stamford, with Wesley asleep on the couch and Iris's school folder still open on the floor, and I read a document that said, "The house at 47 Harbor Lane belonged to a trust I was now the successor trustee of," which meant that, as long as Grandpa was alive, he controlled the property. But the moment his capacity was in question, the moment someone tried to move it out of the trust without his lawyer's counter-signature, I was the one with the legal standing to stop it. I called Grandpa back that night and asked him why he'd waited until Daniel died to tell me. He said, "Because before Daniel died, you didn't need it. Now you might." The quitclaim deed my mother had Vanessa Hargrove notarize in September of 2024 wasn't just morally wrong. It was legally void. The house wasn't Grandpa's to give away. The house was the trust's. Grandpa, as trustee, could transfer it. But only with Bennett Calloway's countersignature, per the 2020 amendment. The quitclaim deed had no such signature. It had only Grandpa's tired hand, my mother's eager pressure, and a notary stamp that should have been returned to the Connecticut Secretary of State 4 months earlier. I called David Northcott the morning after I found the deed. David had known Daniel since they were 19. He'd been at our wedding. He'd been at the funeral. He answered on the second ring. "Alicia, what's going on?" My mother had my grandfather sign a quitclaim deed in September, transferring the Mystic House to herself and my father. The notary's commission was expired. The house is in a trust she doesn't know exists, and I'm the successor trustee with oversight authority. There was a long pause. Then David said, "I'm going to need you to come into my office on Saturday." I drove down on Saturday with Iris's compass in my pocket. David and I spent 4 hours at his conference table mapping out what I had and what I didn't. The deed, the trust, the expired notary, the signature mismatch. He looked up at me. "Alicia, this is enough to void the transfer today. We could file Monday." "I know." "But you don't want to." "No." He waited. I said, "Grandpa told me something, a long time ago, that I didn't understand until this week. He said the best way to stop a person from rewriting history is to let them write enough of it down first." David nodded, slowly. He understood that kind of patience. He'd been a Whitlock long enough to know what we were like. "Okay," he said. "Then we wait. But Alicia, you're going to need a recording. Of him. Lucid. On the record. Before her next doctor visit puts a different stamp on his file." I drove home that night and marked a date on my calendar in pencil. Tuesday in February. Beatrice has 9 a.m. tea time. February 11th, 2025 was a Tuesday. I drove up to Mystic at 9:32 a.m. with a box of Krispy Kreme donuts on the passenger seat and my phone in the inside pocket of my blazer. The voice memos app was running. I'd tested it 3 times in the driveway. Connecticut is a one-party consent state for in-person conversations. I was about to be the one party. I didn't feel guilty about it. I'd asked Grandpa 3 weeks earlier if he'd mind being recorded on a day when he felt clear, and he'd said, "I'd insist on it." He opened the door and smiled the way he smiled on a good day. "My girl." "Hi, Grandpa. Did you wind the watch this morning?" "You wound it on Sunday. You haven't missed once." We sat at the kitchen table. The light coming through the window was that thin February light that makes everything look honest. He took a donut. I took a donut. He poured coffee into the green ceramic mug that had been his wife's. He took the pocket watch out of his cardigan pocket. He'd been carrying it more often that month. And set it on the table between us. "Ask me what you came to ask," he said. "Grandpa." "About the document Mom had you sign in September." He nodded. "Tell me what you remember about it." He started talking. I didn't interrupt. He told me about the drive to New London. He told me about Vanessa Hargrove's office, which smelled like nail salon chemicals. He told me what my mother had said in the car. "It's about insurance. Nothing changes. Just sign here." "Dad?" He told me about the moment he'd asked, twice, if the house was affected, and she'd said no. He told me he hadn't read the document carefully because his eyes were tired, and his daughter-in-law was being patient with him in a way she rarely was. Then he told me what he actually wanted. The Mystic House. When I die. 4 equal parts. Walter gets 1, Madeline gets 1. Daniel's children, Iris and Wesley, get 1 between them, held until they're 25. The 4th? That one's for Alicia. Because she's the one who wound the watch every Sunday. And because Daniel can't be here to do it. His voice didn't shake when he said Daniel's name. He looked at the phone in my blazer pocket like he knew exactly where it was. Then he said the line I would think about every night for the next 14 months. Alicia, when the day comes, and it will come, don't show them this first. Don't bring it out and threaten with it. Make them say it out loud first. Make your mother say what she thinks of those children. Make your father stay silent in the way that proves he knew. Then play it. Let me speak when I can, because by the time you need this, I may not be able to. 18 minutes, top to bottom. I drove home with one hand on the steering wheel and one hand on the phone in my pocket, like I was carrying something alive. By the time I reached Stamford, I had 3 backups. 1 on a drive in my home safe, 1 on a USB in the safe at the title office, 1 encrypted in the cloud behind a password Grandpa had given me the year Iris was born, his childhood phone number, the one that hadn't existed in 50 years. For the next 8 months, nothing happened. That's not quite true. My mother continued to live in Grandpa's house. She continued to take him to appointments. She continued to call my Aunt Gloria and say things like, "Dad is fading, but we're managing," which Gloria continued to relay to me with a kind of weary fury. But on paper, the dust seemed to settle. The quitclaim deed sat in the new London County Registry, unchallenged. My mother didn't know it was void. She thought she owned my grandfather's house. Then in August of 2025, she had Grandpa sign a power of attorney. Vanessa Hargrove was the notary again. The middle initial was wrong again. The signature pressure was even weaker than September. And in the lower right-hand corner of the document, my mother had added a phrase she clearly didn't understand the legal weight of: full authority over all real and personal property, present and future. I didn't find out about the POA until December. I was reviewing a routine title transfer at the office, a small parcel of land in Stonington, just outside Mystic. The seller listed on the deed was Beatrice Penhaligon, attorney in fact, for Edmund A. Penhaligon, POA dated August 14th, 2025. I stopped breathing for a second. Then I pulled the POA from the county clerk's online portal. There it was, Vanessa Hargrove's expired stamp, Edmund H. Penhaligon, the same weak slant. The buyer of the Stonington parcel was an LLC called Crosswind Holdings, registered in Connecticut 3 months earlier, listing my sister Madeline as principal. Madeline had used a forged power of attorney to sell Grandpa's land to her own ALLC for $185,000, 4 days before her son Braden's 17th birthday. I sat in my office for a long time. Then I pulled Grandpa's credit report. I had healthcare power of attorney as of November 2023, which gave me limited financial inquiry rights. And I saw the rest of it. A home equity loan. October 9th, 2025. Charter Oak Federal Credit Union, Groton Branch. Borrowed against the house at 47 Harbor Lane. Principal, $80,000. Stated purpose, home renovations. 2 weeks after the loan funded, $79,900 had moved by wire transfer to Land Rover Norwich. I picked up the phone and called the dealership pretending to be a trust officer. Within 90 seconds, I had what I needed. A 2026 Range Rover Sport autobiography, Santorini Black. Title registered to Beatrice M. Penhaligon. Braden Cross listed as authorized driver. Total out-the-door cost, including tax and registration, $84,210. My mother had taken $80,000 out of my grandfather's home, a home that wasn't legally hers to borrow against, to buy her favorite grandson a luxury SUV. And she'd done it 3 weeks before Christmas, while telling the rest of the family that Grandpa's medical bills were starting to add up. I closed my laptop. I sat at my desk in the dark for almost an hour. Then I called David Northcott and said, "It's time." He asked me when. I said, "Grandpa's 90th birthday, April 11th. David didn't argue. He understood, the same way he'd understood in September. He'd known Daniel. He knew Penhaligons. We didn't act loud. We acted precisely. He told me what to bring. The trust. The amendment. The quitclaim deed. The POA. The home equity loan. The signature comparison. The notary commission expiration. The Stonington transaction. The wire transfer to Land Rover Norwich. The Range Rover title. The recording. I asked him if he thought my grandfather could handle being in the room. He said, "Alicia, your grandfather has been waiting 12 years for someone to do this for him. He'll handle it." That was the week of January 8th. I had 13 weeks to prepare. In March, 3 weeks before the birthday, an envelope arrived in the mail. Certified. From Grandpa. Inside was a smaller cream envelope, sealed with red wax, stamped with the EP seal he'd inherited from his father. Across the front, in his handwriting, slower than it used to be, but still recognizably his, were 5 words. "Don't open. You'll know when." I put it in the walnut box with everything else. I want to tell you, briefly, about what my children made for him. In early March, Iris asked me a question I'd been waiting for her to ask for almost 2 years. "Mom, does Grandpa still remember us?" We were on the couch. It was raining. She was holding the brass compass he'd given her the year she turned 10, the one she carried in her school backpack like a coin you don't spend. I told her the truth. Some days he remembers everything. Some days he doesn't. But love doesn't need memory, sweetheart. It just needs presence. She thought about that for a long time. Then she said, "Can we make him something he can hold? Like, not on a phone, on paper. So when his memory is foggy, the thing reminds him." I said yes. She spent $32 of her own birthday money she'd been saving for a guitar pedal, on a leather-bound album from a stationery shop on Bedford Street. 60 pages. She picked the photos. She went through every album in our house, every cloud folder, every phone, and chose the moments. Grandpa teaching Wesley to read a compass. Grandpa eating chowder at latitude 41. Grandpa holding Iris on her first day of kindergarten. Grandpa, 2 summers ago, asleep in the porch chair with Wesley curled against his side. Wesley wrote the captions, with the Parker fountain pen Grandpa had given him for his 8th birthday. He wrote them in block letters, slow and careful, the way 9-year-olds write when they understand something matters. Then Wesley sat down and wrote a poem. He wrote 14 drafts. He walked to the Stanford Library by himself one Saturday afternoon to look up rhyming words in a children's poetry book. Iris helped him with 2 of the rhymes. The final version was 8 lines long. He printed it on cream paper and slipped it into the album between pages 30 and 31. The morning of April 11th, before we got in the car, Wesley asked me to read it back to him so he could decide if it was ready. I read it. "I don't need you to remember me, Grandpa. I just need you to be here. I don't need you to know my name today. I know I'm still your dear. The watch tells time, but you tell me the things that time forgot. So when your memory leaves the room, I'll bring it back. A lot." He looked up at me. "Mom, will it make Grandpa happy or sad?" I said, "Both." And both are okay. Both means he's still listening. He nodded. He folded the poem in half, then in half again, and slipped it back into the album. We got in the car at 1 p.m. I drove the I-95 north in complete silence. Even the radio knew. The Mystic House was full by the time we arrived at 3 o'clock. 22 relatives, all dressed in cashmere and wool, all gathered for the patriarch's 90th. The dining table had been extended with 2 leaves and 12 folding chairs. White tablecloth. Henrietta's good china. The set with the pale blue trim that my mother had quietly transferred into her own name 2 years earlier, without telling anyone. The 3-tier cake from the bakery in Pawcatuck. 90 candles, ready to be lit at 6. Grandpa met us at the door. It was a good day. I could tell from his eyes before he said a word. "My girl, did you wind the watch this morning?" "Yes, Grandpa, right on time." He looked down at Iris and Wesley. He didn't kneel. His knees couldn't anymore, but he leaned forward enough that Wesley could put his small hand on Grandpa's cardigan sleeve. "Did you bring me something?" Iris held up the leather album. Wesley held up the poem, folded twice. "We made it ourselves," Wesley said, very seriously. "It has a poem." Grandpa's eyes filled with water. He didn't let it fall. "I will read every word," he said, twice. My mother appeared in the foyer behind him. She was wearing a cream cashmere sweater and her diamond drop earrings, the ones my grandmother had left her, in the only kind gesture Henrietta ever made toward Beatrice in 40 years of marriage. She was holding a flute of champagne. She looked at my tote bag. "What did you bring, dear? It looks heavy." I smiled at her. "A little something for the table." She smiled back. She'd misread me. She thought I was being polite. Braden was sitting at the far end of the dining room on his phone, in a Brooks Brothers blazer that didn't quite fit. He looked up when we came in. He's 17, a tall, slightly anxious kid who's been groomed for Brown University since he was 11. He hasn't been cruel to my children, ever. He's been worse than cruel. He's been absent. He's treated them the way you treat children of an aunt you don't really know. I'd put a chair out for him in my forgiveness, years ago, just in case he needed it later. I wasn't sure yet whether he'd take it. My sister Madeleine air-kissed me without making eye contact. "Oh, you brought the kids. Cute." Aunt Gloria looked up from her seat at the corner of the table. 64 years old, sister-in-law to Henrietta the wife, the only woman in this family who'd ever told my mother to be quiet at a Thanksgiving table. She didn't smile at me. She looked at the tote bag in my hand, and her eyes went very still. She knew I was carrying something. She didn't know what. Grandpa sat down at the head of the table in the chair with the high back and the green cushion. I sat to his right. Iris sat next to me. Wesley sat next to Iris. The album sat between them, untouched, waiting. My mother stood and clinked her champagne flute 3 times. "Welcome, everyone, to Edmund's 90th, she said. "Before we light the candles, before we eat, there's something we want to do. A gift. From this family, to the future of this family." She walked to the buffet. She lifted a red velvet box. She crossed the room and stood behind Braden's chair, and she placed the box on the table in front of him with the care of a coronation. "Braden, sweetheart, open it." He did. Inside the box was a Range Rover key fob, black plastic, silver logo, and under it, folded twice, was a paper envelope printed with the words, "Land Rover, Norwich." The room cheered. My father stood up and took a photo. Madeline actually cried. Performative, practiced, the kind of crying that knows where the cameras are. Braden looked at the keys, then at his mother, then at his grandmother. He smiled. It wasn't a real smile. I noticed. My mother turned to the rest of the room. "Braden is going to Brown next fall. He needs a car that's safe, a car that's worthy of him. A car worthy of the Penhaligon name." Then she walked to the table beside the buffet, where two thin envelopes sat. One had Iris's name on it in glittery pen. One had Wesley's. She picked them up and crossed the room to where my children were sitting, and she handed them over with the same energy a teacher hands back a quiz. Iris, Wesley, open them together. Iris opened hers, a $5 Walgreens card. No note, no card. Just the plastic tucked into a generic envelope that hadn't even been sealed properly. Wesley opened his. Nothing. The envelope was empty. The flap had been glued twice. I could see the second smear of dried adhesive along the inside fold, as if someone had opened it after sealing it, checked it, and resealed it without putting anything in. He looked inside again. He turned it upside down and shook it. He whispered, "Mom, mine is empty. Did Grandma forget?" The room went very still. Iris held the $5 card with both hands like it might break. Aunt Gloria looked at my mother. My mother lifted her champagne flute and smiled. "You can't expect us to treat all the grandkids the same. Some are more special," she announced loudly. "Braden carries the Penhaligon name forward. Your kids, well, they only have their father's surname. They're not really one of us." I heard Grandpa set his coffee cup down on the saucer. It was the smallest sound in the room. It was the loudest thing I have ever heard. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I reached into the tote bag and lifted out the walnut box. The one Grandpa had given me in November of 2023, the one I'd been keeping ready for 14 months. And I walked to the head of the table. I placed it in front of Grandpa, not in front of my mother. I lifted the pocket watch out of my blazer pocket, the one he'd wound that morning, the way he'd promised me he would, and I set it on the lid. I kissed his forehead. "Wind it when you're ready, Grandpa," I said. I took my children's hands. I led them out of the dining room and into the hallway, where the coats hung and the grandfather clock ticked, and I stopped near the doorframe. Close enough to hear, close enough for Iris to see if she wanted to, far enough that Wesley could sit on the bench and not look back. Iris stood beside me. She held my hand very tight. She didn't cry. Wesley sat down. He held the folded poem in his lap. Behind us, in the dining room, my mother's voice rose for the first time all afternoon. "What is this, Alicia? What is this?" I didn't turn around. I waited for her to say it again. She did. "I'm going to tell you what happened in the room next, because Aunt Gloria told me," with her hand on my arm, on a porch in Mystic 3 days later. For a long moment after I left, no one moved. Braden set the Range Rover key down on the placemat in front of him. He didn't pick it up again. Madeline laughed, a sharp little laugh that was meant to break the silence and didn't. God, she's so dramatic. She brought a box. Aunt Gloria, who had been waiting in this family for 44 years to say what she said next, leaned forward. "Open it, Bea. Now." My mother picked up the steak knife from the place setting next to her. Her hands, Gloria said, were perfectly steady because she still didn't know what was in front of her. She slid the knife under the navy ribbon and cut it. She lifted the lid. The pocket watch slipped sideways and made a small chink against the porcelain cake stand. Grandpa, from his chair at the head of the table, said quietly, "That's mine." My mother didn't look at him. She lifted out the first item, a black and white photograph, 5x7, of Grandpa holding Iris when she was 3 days old in May of 2014. The cardigan he was wearing in the photo was the same one he was wearing in the room. She turned it over. On the back, in fountain pen ink, Grandpa had written, "Years ago, the year Daniel died, when he'd been alone in this same house sorting his own life. First Penhaligon of the next generation." I held her before her father did, because Daniel was parking the car. I never let go. My mother's hand started to shake. "Where did she get this?" she whispered. "It's mine," Grandpa said again. I wrote on the back. Madeline reached over and pulled the next item out of the box. A folder, Navy leather, with a stamped seal at the top. Penhaligon Revocable Living Trust, executed June 14, 2014. Bennett Calloway, Counsel. She opened it. She read the first page. Her face changed. This is a trust. Whose trust is this? Read the beneficiaries, Aunt Gloria said. Madeline read, out loud, because she didn't yet understand what it meant. Beneficiaries upon the death of the grantor. Walter Penhaligon, 1/4 share. Madeline Penhaligon Cross, 1/4 share. The heirs of Daniel Whitlock, namely Iris Whitlock and Wesley Whitlock, held in trust until age 25, 1/4 share together. Alicia Penhaligon, 1/4 share. The room went silent in a different way. Braden, sitting 6 chairs down, said, Wait, Iris and Wesley are in Grandpa's trust? Of course they are, Grandpa said. It was the first full sentence he'd said since the candles. He pushed his chair back. He stood. His left hand pressed flat against the table for balance. His right hand reached, very slowly, for the pocket watch on top of the open box. He picked it up. He wound it 4 times. The ratchet clicked, small and clear, in the silence of the room. He looked at my mother. Beatrice, he said, show everyone the deed. The real one. Not the one you made me sign. Bennett Calloway has been holding it for me since 2014. Call him. He's 5 miles away. Tell him I asked. Aunt Gloria stood up. I'll call him. She walked into the kitchen with her phone. 22 relatives sat at the table and watched the doorway she had walked through. Nobody spoke. My mother sat down. Hard, like her legs had stopped working. My father, Walter, who had not said one word since the cake was brought out, looked at his hands. Madeline was still holding the trust folder. She was reading the second page now. The page that listed the 2020 amendment, naming me as successor trustee with oversight authority over any real estate transactions during Grandpa's lifetime. I watched her from the hallway. I watched her face do the math. She said very quietly, Mom, what did you do? Nothing, my mother said, but her voice had thinned. The volume had drained out of it. Aunt Gloria came back from the kitchen. Bennett's on his way. He'll be here in 20 minutes. While we waited, Madeline kept reading the documents in the box. Quitclaim deed, September 18th, 2024. Edmund H. Penhaligon, middle initial wrong. Notary, Vanessa Hargrove. Filed in New London County. Madeline recognized Vanessa's name halfway through and stopped reading aloud. POA, August 14th, 2025. Same name, same notary, same wrong middle initial. Home equity loan, October 9th, 2025, $80,000. Stated purpose, home renovations. Borrower, Edmund Penhaligon. Co-borrowers, Walter and Beatrice Penhaligon, then a printout of the wire transfer. October 23rd, 2025, $79,900. Recipient, Land Rover Norwich, then the title to the Range Rover. Braden, when Madeline pulled the Range Rover title out of the folder, picked up the key fob from his placemat and slid it across the table toward his mother. He didn't say anything. He just slid it. His mother looked at him like he'd slapped her. He looked back at her like he'd finally been allowed to see her. Aunt Gloria pulled the next layer out of the box. A USB drive, a small black SanDisk, a note attached. Play file 1. Listen to all 18 minutes. Don't skip. She picked up Braden's open laptop from the side table, the one he'd been on 5 minutes earlier, scrolling Instagram during his own grandmother's coronation, and plugged the USB in. The file opened. You could hear Grandpa's kitchen, the clink of a coffee mug, the crinkle of a Krispy Kreme bag, then Grandpa's voice, 14 months younger, clearer. The Mystic House, when I die. 4 equal parts. Walter gets 1, Madeline gets 1. Daniel's children, Iris and Wesley, get 1 between them, held until they're 25. The 4th, that one's for Alicia, because she's the one who wound the watch every Sunday, and because Daniel can't be here to do it. My mother started crying. It wasn't remorse. I want to be clear about that. Aunt Gloria told me later that she watched my mother's face very carefully, and what was on it was fear. The kind of fear that comes from realizing the room is no longer yours. The recording kept playing. Alicia, when the day comes, and it will come, don't show them this first. Don't bring it out and threaten with it. Make them say it out loud first. Make your mother say what she thinks of those children. Make your father stay silent in the way that proves he knew. Then play it. Let me speak when I can, because by the time you need this, I may not be able to. The room had no oxygen in it. Bennett Calloway walked through the front door at 4:53 p.m. He was 78 years old. He'd been Grandpa's attorney since 1979. He was carrying a leather portfolio. He nodded at me in the hallway and didn't break stride. He walked to Grandpa. He set the portfolio down. He opened it. Inside was the original trust, signed June 14th, 2014. Witnessed by Henrietta Sutton, Grandpa's late sister, Iris's great-aunt, and notarized by a mystic notary named Robert. No, Bennett signed his own register that day, which I would only realize when I read the certification page later. The trust was real. The trust had been real for almost 12 years. Bennett looked at my mother. Beatrice, the September 2024 quitclaim is void. The August 2025 power of attorney is void. The October home equity loan was drawn against property your father did not have legal authority to encumber. I've spoken to David Northcott. We will be filing an emergency petition with the Connecticut Probate Court on Monday morning. I came tonight because Edmund asked me to, and because I wanted to be the one who told you. She didn't answer. He turned to my father. Walter, I knew your father for 46 years. I'm sorry it ended this way. My father said the first thing he'd said all evening. I'm sorry too. Grandpa was still standing. He hadn't sat down. He picked up the album Iris had made. He picked up the folded poem Wesley had slipped into page 30. He unfolded the poem. He read it out loud. Slowly, every word, in his marine engineer voice that had once given commands to 25-man crews, to the entire room. I don't need you to remember me, Grandpa. I just need you to be here. I don't need you to know my name today. I know I'm still your dear. The watch tells time, but you tell me the things that time forgot. So when your memory leaves the room, I'll bring it back. A lot. He finished. He sat down. Wesley walked out of the hallway, past my mother, past Madeleine, past Braden, and climbed up into Grandpa's lap. Iris walked over and stood beside the chair. Grandpa put one arm around her. Aunt Gloria looked at my mother. Not tonight, Bea. Tonight you listen. We didn't stay for cake. Grandpa asked me to take Iris and Wesley home. He said he wanted to stay in the house. His house. And have a quiet evening with Aunt Gloria, who would not be leaving until tomorrow. Bennett Calloway stayed for another hour, going over the legal sequence with Grandpa and my father in the parlor, while my mother went upstairs and didn't come back down. I drove the 85 miles to Stamford with both my children asleep in the back seat. Iris was holding the brass compass. Wesley was holding the folded poem, which Grandpa had pressed back into his hand at the door. I called Aunt Gloria from a mobile station outside Old Saybrook. She said, Bennett filed an emergency petition motion in his head before he even left the house. Monday morning, it's done. The judge in Mystic District hates elder abuse cases. Loves them, I should say. Loves to undo them. And my mother? She's sitting on the bed upstairs. Walter is sitting in the parlor. They aren't speaking. I don't know if they ever will again. I don't think it matters. I drove home. 3 days later, on Monday morning, David Northcott and Bennett Calloway filed jointly with the Connecticut Probate Court, Mystic District. The quitclaim deed was voided that afternoon. The POA was voided by noon Tuesday. The home equity loan was suspended pending unwind on Wednesday. By Thursday, the court had ordered the Range Rover returned to Land Rover Norwich under Connecticut's Elder Financial Abuse Statute, Section 17B-451. The dealership agreed within an hour. They sent a flatbed. The hearing was on April 28th. Grandpa attended in person. He wore the navy suit he'd worn to Aunt Henrietta the sister's funeral in 2020. Judge Eleanor Trumbull asked him 4 questions. Full name, Edmund Augustus Penhaligon. Date of birth, April 11th, 1936. Address, 47 Harbor Lane, Mystic, Connecticut, since 1968. Wishes regarding the property. He answered, 4 equal parts, Your Honor. As written in 2014, as recorded today. She granted the petition from the bench. The Range Rover left Mystic on a flatbed the morning of May 2nd. Aunt Gloria sent me a photo. I showed it to Iris. She didn't gasp. She didn't smile. She just looked at the picture for a long moment and then said, Grandpa likes the chowder at latitude 41, table 7. Can we take him? We took him the following weekend. Madeline's real estate license was suspended for 90 days pending review by the Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection. Vanessa Hargrove's expired notary stamp was formally revoked, retroactively, by the Connecticut Secretary of State, which meant she also faced a misdemeanor charge for using credentials she wasn't entitled to. Crosswind Holdings, the LLC that had bought the Stonington land for $185,000, was ordered to return the property and surrender the proceeds. My parents had to pay back the $80,000 from the home equity loan as personal debt, with interest. They will be paying it for the rest of their lives. A court-appointed conservator, a CPA named Francis Bellamy, completely independent of our family, was assigned to oversee Grandpa's finances going forward, with me as his designated trust officer and Bennett Calloway as legal counsel. My mother was permanently removed from any financial proximity to my grandfather. She called me once, on May 5th. The call lasted 31 seconds. What did you tell the judge? I didn't, Mom. Grandpa did. She hung up. I didn't add her to my favorites. I never removed her from contacts either. There's a difference. The door isn't locked. It's just not open anymore. On May 22nd, Grandpa moved into our house in Stamford. I'd been preparing the upstairs bedroom for 3 weeks. New handrails along the stairs, a bedside lamp with a brighter bulb, Henrietta the wife's quilt, the patchwork one she'd sewn in 1990, in navy and white, which my mother had tried to take when she moved in, but which Aunt Gloria had quietly removed from the linen closet and held for me, spread across the bed. A small table by the window, with the walnut box on it, empty now, waiting for the pocket watch each night. The room faced east, morning light. Grandpa had always preferred east windows. He walked in. He looked at the quilt. He said, "You put Henrietta's quilt on the bed." "Of course, Grandpa. She always made me feel safe." "Me too." He sat down on the edge of the bed. He looked at the pocket watch in his hand. Then he looked at me. "There's one more thing I have to give you." I knew what he meant. I went to the safe in my office downstairs and took out the cream envelope he'd mailed me in March. The one stamped, "Don't open. You'll know when." I brought it upstairs. I sat next to him on the bed. "Open it now," he said. "Read it to me. I want to hear how it sounds out loud, while I can still recognize my own words." I broke the wax seal. 3 pages, cream paper. His handwriting. Slower than I remembered, but his. The first page was for me. Alicia, you wound the watch when I couldn't. You recorded my voice when I asked. You waited for the room to need the truth before you handed it over. That isn't strategy. That's loyalty disguised as patience. The watch belongs to you for as long as you want it. The house, in time, will be a quarter yours. But what I'm really giving you, what I've been giving you since the year Iris was born, is permission to stop apologizing for being the daughter your mother decided to overlook. You were never less. You were just quieter. Quiet is not less. Quiet is what survives. I had to stop reading 3 times. Grandpa squeezed my hand each time. He didn't speak. He just waited. The second page was for Iris and Wesley. I called them in. They climbed onto the bed. Iris sat on Grandpa's left side. Wesley sat in his lap. The quilt covered all 4 of us. I read, Iris and Wesley. By the time you read this, you will have learned that not every adult in your life will love you fairly. That isn't your fault. Special isn't given. Special is what stays gentle when the world isn't. You wrote me a poem, Wesley, that made me cry on a day when crying was hard. You made me an album, Iris, that I will look at every morning until I can't anymore. The pocket watch, the one your mother has been winding every Sunday since 2023, is yours, Iris, on your 16th birthday. Wesley, the cardigan in the back of my closet, the one your great-grandmother knit for me in 1962, is yours when you turn 12. Stay gentle. Your mother already knows how. Wesley looked up at Grandpa. Grandpa, did you know we love you even when you forget us? Grandpa took a long breath. The kind of breath 90-year-olds take when they're choosing the next word carefully. I know now. The third page was for Madeline. He'd written it himself, weeks before any of this. He hadn't shown it to me before. He hadn't shown it to anyone. Madeline, I never stopped being your grandfather. The trust I wrote in 2014 left you an equal quarter. Whatever your mother told you, I never wrote you out. I just wrote your nephew and niece in. You can come back when you're ready to come back as yourself, not as your mother's lawyer. Do you want me to send it? I asked. Yes. I mailed it the next day, certified. No return note from me. 4 weeks later, in late May, Madeline sent back a 1-line text from a number she'd blocked me from for 2 years. I'm ready to talk when you are. I haven't answered yet. I will. Just not yet. Braden came to our house on a Saturday in mid-May, alone, on the train from Westport. He stood on the front porch holding a small potted cyclamen and looking like he wished he could be anywhere else. He's 17. He's going to Brown in September. He's the boy my mother decided was the future of a name he doesn't actually carry. Cross, not Penhaligon. And I'm not sure he'd realized that until he heard Madeline read the trust out loud. He asked if he could see Iris and Wesley. I let him in. He apologized to them. He didn't make excuses. He didn't blame his mother. He said, "You guys made him an album. I gave him a Range Rover I didn't earn. I should have asked where the money came from. I'm sorry." Wesley hugged him. Iris waited a moment longer, then did too. Braden cried. It was the first time I'd ever seen my nephew cry. He's a tall kid. He looked like a much smaller boy for about 30 seconds. He stayed for dinner. He ate David's lasagna. He helped Wesley wash the dishes. He left on the 7:30 train. He's been texting Iris almost every Sunday since asking how Grandpa is. That's also healing. It doesn't have to be loud. If you've been with me this whole way, I want to say one more thing. My grandfather is still alive as I write this. Some mornings he asks me what day it is twice. Some mornings he tells me a story about Daniel that I've never heard. We don't try to keep score. We just wind the watch. Sunday after Sunday. Iris does it now, mostly. She's been practicing the 7-turn rhythm I taught her, and she's better at it than I ever was. Wesley reads the poem to Grandpa on rainy afternoons. Aunt Gloria comes down from Mystic every other weekend. My mother and father still live in the house at 47 Harbor Lane. For now. The trust allows it during Grandpa's lifetime. After that, the house will be sold and the proceeds divided as the 2014 trust originally specified. My mother knows this. She hasn't fought it. She hasn't apologized either.